What up, Marsh Pod? Recording this on Friday morning, bright and early. We are just over 24 hours away from the Unsigned Hype Tournament. Great introduction a year ago to the prep recruiting season for SimWorld Prep. So exciting that it's got a return. 4 teams, 5 dudes per team, lining up among the top recruits in each region. So let's take a peek. Across the board, 4 players, 1 from each team that we're looking out for here in the Unsigned Hype Tournament, which I believe is 2 p.m. on Saturday. Let's start with the East. And look, it's the easy move here would have been number 1 player in each region. We somewhat do that, but there's reason behind each of them. So let's start with the East. It's JV on deck. He's Mr. New York. He's a 6'7" offensive creator from the post, a switch defender. So despite his size, he's not somebody that you would expect to see as a primary big man, but rather as a guy that can defend the 4, the 3, especially at this level. And at 6'7", you got to like that upside that he brings to his defensive capabilities. If he gets up, if Deck gets to be 6'9", 6'10", he suddenly starts to be a really dangerous defensive player in the realm of a Kawhi Leonard type of player. Depending on the athleticism and how that matures, somebody, a defensive player similar to like a young Anthony Davis or potentially a Giannis Antetokounmpo, where you really can lock up a lot of those, bigger wings and even hold your own against some of the larger centers in the league. He's under 200 pounds, so he's not somebody that you'd really expect to see as a center stopper later in his career. But that's truthfully not why we're interested in him. He's out of New York. So that means there's 3 teams that are in his region: Philadelphia, Run DMV, and Gotham 5. Let's start with Philadelphia. They have a full roster, so in theory, you look at that, and again, I'm not saying that Deck's going to be the guy that those 3 teams go for. Purely observational, right? So let's just caveat that. But let's start with Philadelphia. They have a full roster. So if Deck has a good game, showcasing some of that, would Philadelphia be willing to cut somebody to add him in? Look, coaches are going to say, we like our roster right now. We recruited these guys specifically, and that's why we got the roster that we got. If somebody pops off in this thing, there's going to be some hard decisions to make, man. There's going to be some hard decisions to make. So if he has a great game, does Philadelphia look to maybe cut somebody to add him? They're not a big team, but they're loaded with offensive creators. They don't have much shooting. So Deck wouldn't step in and provide instant shooting, but he would give them a little bit more size, and he would give them another offensive creator. And I think you could go the route, if you're Philadelphia here, we're going to buy into just having creators across the board, as opposed to, other teams that try to mix and match strategically with different skill sets. Next, go Run DMV. They're lanky, man. They are a lanky team. They got a roster spot, but they're also not really flush with creators. So from a purely roster construction and roster need standpoint, Run DMV actually makes a lot of sense for both Deck and DMV. It keeps them that maintenance of size that they've got up and down that roster, but you're also adding a player that can create and filling that missing piece of the DMV roster. All right, last piece is Gotham 5. I don't think there's a favorite in the clubhouse right now for the services of JV on Tech, but Gotham only has 3 offensive creators right now. 2 of them are Carter Cash, Cal McKnight. They're both new to the roster. Both Cash and McKnight are really great shooters, something that Deck is not. And I think the most efficient use of Deck in the long run could be to surround him with good shooters. Now, Deck is not going to be a day 1 starter. I don't think anybody that's coming in is going to get that, not because they aren't talented enough, but because it's likely that these rosters are so established right now that coaches know exactly what they're going to do. But you can make the case that a Cash, McKnight, add in Williams's, you start putting together a really dangerous rotation built around a lot of playmaking. Let's move to the team out of the Southeast. We're going to go DeMarco Graham. He's the number 11 player right now in the Southeast region. Similar to Deck, he's a great creator from the post position, a little bit more size at 6'10", 229. Why is it interesting? He's out of Miami, but Yacht Club has a full roster spot. Yacht is the only team whose in-region state is Florida. So do teams have any sponsorships to go out and snag him? He'll need to have a huge game, and this is why he's interesting to watch. He will need to have a huge game to convince someone to make that type of commitment, to go out of region and bring him in to their roster. At the same time, similar to what we talked about with Philadelphia and JV on Deck, does Yacht Club get their hand played? Does Graham have such a good game that you at Yacht Club, Marcus Laster, has to make a tough decision on the existing pieces that they have? Move Team Midwest, and the name I'm looking at is Jarrell Beauchamp. Why? Well, Beauchamp was expected to sign with Bad Boys. He's the number 1 player out of the Mountain West region, sitting right there for Rocky Mountain Monsters. But he's not on Bad Boys, and Bad Boys roster is full right now. So what exactly happened? Samuel Charles came out with that initial report. Haven't really heard much otherwise. So why did that not come together? That's fascinating. It's something that we haven't seen reporting on, like I said, and it's something worth watching. But now he's right there. He's still there in the region for Rocky Mountain. Does he have a good game that forces a commitment in hand from them? Or does something, again, free up in Bad Boys? There's a lot of roster spots that are accounted for right now. I don't think that it's a foregone conclusion that every team with a full roster spot or full roster is dedicated to those 10 guys. I think there's a very real chance we see some cuts after this and subsequently some other signings. Jarrell Beauchamp is the name to watch on that. And then the last one, Sol Evans. He's the number 1 player in the Pacific region. Again, I said this wasn't going to be all number 1. 3 of the 4 were. DeMarco Graham, number 11. But Sol Evans, 6'5" paint defender out of Oakland. He's not going to Bay Area. I think that's one of the few teams that has a full roster spot or a full roster that I'm pretty convinced they're not moving off of. I think there's some other teams that I could be convinced of it. That's why I brought them up. But Bay Area is not moving away from a roster spot. So, Showtime and Best Coast both have spots to be filled. Let's start with Showtime. They're a lengthy team. I don't think they have anybody under 6'4", 6'3". It's a big team. Could fill in because they don't have much post defense, which is what Sol Evans is best at. You can add him. Yes, he's 6'5", but yes, you're projecting long-term. 6'5" at 15 years old is not small. Let's always remind folks of this. This is not college. This is not the NBA. 6'5" at 15, 16 years old is a big kid. So he could step in for Showtime and provide instant post defense. They just don't have a roster that's necessarily loaded with those types of players. Meanwhile, Best Coast could use a guy with his type of size. They have 5 guys of, I think it's 8 or 9 on their roster right now. 5 guys that are 6'3" and under. So they're certainly looking to try to add size. You have to imagine at this point in the recruiting cycle, not only size but also somebody who can defend with that size. That's exactly what Sol Evans can do. If you look at some of these other bigs that we talked about, DeMarco Graham, JV on Deck, they're great offensive creators from the post. You might classify them as a paint defender, but they're not. That's not where their elite skill set or their high level skill set is at, as it is compared to Sol Evans. He is a defender inside, and if given the chance, and if he has a good game, I could most certainly see a bit of a bidding war between Showtime and Best Coast Ballers to keep his services in state. So, huge game coming in at 2 p.m. on Saturday. Unsigned hype tournament. I think it's 3 games for each team. It's going to be good. Thank you to the producers. We'll be back on Monday, and I will actually see you on that call on Saturday. See you then.